bad examples of those. You know, you're looking at the first names that came to mind, but you know, in theory, you should take the same amount of equipment for each setup.
We then said, we don't want you to use black hoardings, because they were signing off the licenses. Well, what do you want? I said, well, here's a soft pastel palette. Have a choose of those and do any of them. They did that. They went, all right, we'll do this colour. And they went, she signed it off. Happy days. Don't quote that one when it goes out, but he knows. We are having,
So in the background, a lot of the construction companies are starting to inquire about being more inclusive, so catering for the blind and catering for different groups. But what they're doing, so recently when we went to SQS, they said, oh, we'd like to come along, but we'd like to demonstrate what new products you've got and how we can help the blind. So we'd like to see some braille. Okay. Well, do you really want a blind person fondling the way around the site trying to find the braille? It's not really, you know, that was my instant reaction. But we developed, we got a printer to actually print some braille and supplied them what they wanted, but then I invited you along, Michael, to join in on that particular session and said, you know, you're only really targeting a minority of people with that. And Michael demonstrated it perfectly actually in the meeting, because we're talking about being more inclusive, but you can't be inclusive and just say we're trying to cater for the blind or for the partially sighted.
Yeah, okay.
Because there's so many other groups. And you would, if you were catering for other groups, you would probably cater for a wider audience.
Are you under pressure as Chevron then not under pressure, but is that now as important into everything you do as like factoring in like sustainability and things like that? Or is this something that's more like, no, we really believe in it, therefore
I think
we need to make sure we're at the forefront of it?
Well, it's something that I believe in, and I've been monitoring what Michael was doing with his three-tier assessment on LinkedIn. And we need to be more inclusive for everybody. And it isn't until I've gone along with Michael and some of his sort of site visits and actually thought, well, I'm missing a trick, because, you know, I've got family members who are in wheelchairs, my sister's disabled, and even when I've designed TM or looked at schemes, I've not really catered for people that I'm actually close to and aware of, you know. So it really is just all about knowledge and training and being considerate. And I think that position, if we as a company can position ourselves where we take those things into consideration, it puts us in a better place.
Was there like a moment where, like you just said, you got family members affected, was there a moment where you're like, we need to be doing more of this, or has it just sort of evolved from knowing Michael and working with TfL?
It's kind of evolved, and it opens your eyes, because you're being shown how it's affecting particular people. I mean, pedestrian crossings are designed where they have a tactile cone underneath, there's an audible alarm, and that's on permanence. You get the tactile paving. There's all sorts of considerations to be more inclusive, but you know, some people can't actually press the push button, some people can't raise their arm up to feel the tactile. There's lots of different things that affect lots of different people in different ways that aren't really considered by able-bodied people.
And how did you both end up in this little area of really focusing on it then? Like, what's your background? What led you to be now having this?
As soon as you meet a member of the community, it just hits straight away. So a lot of work I've been doing was originally when I first started at TfL. This was back in '99, so it's a couple of years ago. There was a person who asked, could somebody from the company come out and cycle with them to understand how we were impacting cyclists. And not a lot of people wanted to do that, so I said, I'll go. So I went out with this person. She was super fast, I struggled keeping up with her. And she was highlighting all these things that I never thought about. And what that led to was setting up something called the Roadworks Patrol. So I used to link with London Cycle Campaign members across London and cycle with them and have a feeling for what it felt like cycling through roadworks. One of the members was disabled, and she goes, "Oh, could you come and have a look outside my house, because they've caused a bit of problem for me." So I said, okay. So I went and watched her, and seeing her struggle started it off. Because it's not until you meet people that you realise, you know, we make these assumptions that, oh, you can see it's there, or you can get to that, and that's all right, isn't it? They'll get by that. And this is some of the attitudes in the construction industry. But from then, it was that lived experience that hit me here. And then you start doing it in your head, how you do things.
What other sort of challenges do people face then? What sort of factors have to be accounted for when you're now planning a scheme? Like, what do you need from construction industry when they're implementing works?
Well, number one, they've got to understand the community they're impacting, and they don't, as a rule. I'd probably say 99% of construction companies we work haven't got a clue how they impact the local community. So when you're looking at design, you can't be inclusive. Inclusive is a very funny term, because if you make something accessible for one person, you might be excluding the other person by doing that. I think this is what Chris has mentioned. If you're designing traffic management with a focus on blind and partially sighted, putting in some form of tactile surfacing, some wheelchair users, some older people, some people with, like myself, with arthritis, I hate going on that, and it hurts me. And imagine on a wheelchair, that is going straight up into your back when you're wheeling over stuff. So you're excluded by what you do. So inclusions are it's a term I probably would say try and avoid, because if you design to be inclusive, you're going to fail. Design to be considerate is probably a better approach.
So that's one of the challenges then, is having a solution for a certain area or person might impact another person in a negative way. So you're not going to say when you're on a crossing, then, for instance, so a blind person may then feel that, you know, it's there to show them the way, whereas a wheelchair user might be impacted and not be comfortable going over the same crossing. So that's unavoidable then, and you're not able to cater or be inclusive for everybody.
I'd say no. I don't think you are. It's
That's
difficult.
the
There's standards out there. So with a crossing, you have what's called the lead-in. We design traffic light push buttons for right-handed people. So we're potentially excluding the left, because the lead-in's an L. So you walk along, you walk down, the push button's on your right. So people will do that. Depending if you've got a cane, you might swap the cane then to use your right hand. That lead-in helps that person get across. Not all, you know. When you're talking about blind and partially sighted, I think it's I don't like to use the word group, because we need to avoid that, because we're all different. Even if you are put in a group, everyone in that group's different anyway. But there's around 2 to 3% of people under that umbrella of visual impairment are blind. And we tend to say, you see someone with a guy go, oh, they're blind, they could be partially sighted. It's education. But yeah, you've got, the spectrum is massive, and I think if you can find a considerate approach that overlaps different things. So if you're thinking about neurodivergent, how overwhelming stuff can impact people. People with learning differences. I don't like the word learning disability. We all learn differently. It's keeping simple signage. Don't overkill with your signage. You know, what I'm hearing from construction companies, I'll just use that word, construction. People are ignoring the footway close sign. Let's put up another 3 up, because that would make a difference. To have 3 more signs that says the same thing. If you can ignore one, you can ignore the rest. But I know a person, she came out with me. She reads every single sign to understand what she's supposed to do. And that's what traffic management's for. So why are you putting up 3 signs? And we did an assessment, I won't be mentioning company names, but we did an assessment with a particular company. And the lead said, well, the more the merrier. She goes, well, not for me, because it's taking me longer to try and understand what you expect me to do. Just now, then you're thinking we're digging a hole with stuff.
Where do you start with that then, Chris, when it comes to being almost like planning to be considerate? If it's already a minefield and you potentially exclude one group by including another, sorry, I know you don't like the word group. Well, where do you even start with that?
Well, you've got to start somewhere, but go back 5 years. We weren't even aware that the minefield was there. We were just going ahead, installing traffic management as per the rule book and thinking that we were doing a good job. And when you actually visit site with somebody that's partially sighted or in a wheelchair or with limited use of the limbs, you actually start to realise what impact you're having, and you start to look at the products that you've got available. So, and that they have to use. So if you take a pedestrian ramp, a temporary ramp to allow wheelchair users to drop down and onto a walkway in the carriageway, those ramps give a gradient of about 1 in 5, and the recommended gradient is 1 in 12 with somebody that's assisted than pushing the wheelchair, and 1 in 15. Now, we all know that we can't have a ramp that's 3 metres long or 2 metres long going into the highway, but there's been no consideration on what effect that ramp. It's just, we need a ramp there. And if you don't see the plastic ramp, you see a bit of tarmac that's sort of dolloped there and, doing a poor job. And that's restrictive for these people. And I don't think people understand how you make wheelchair users feel when they're having a hard time anyhow. They don't need it making any harder, do they?
Are there any really common things that get overlooked? Like, let's just take ramps as one example. Are there anything that's really, really avoidable, let's just say in 80 to 90% of cases, that could be done that would really, really help a lot of people straight away? Or is that too general for the level of nuance that might be involved?
I think use ramps is a good one. Actually, no. Let's go to temporary traffic signals. So if you're putting a setup, some of the setups actually get to see and experience are pretty bad. So some people forget to put in a ramp. Some people, if they use stick down tactiles, they put the push button a metre away from where it is. It's some simple stuff like that can be easily done. I've seen some ramps that send people straight into a barrier. So there's not enough turning room if you're using a wheelchair. You have to when you use the term wheelchair, not all wheelchairs are the same size. Mobility scooters are quite big as well. Push chairs, it's not just one single push chair. You've got wide ones, you've got really long ones that will need to access that ramp. And if you can't turn to get on it to go down and then sweep round again, what's the point in putting it down in the first place? So little things like that, a little bit of consideration.
I think signage as well.
Yeah, so positioning of
Signage would be a
signage.
big one.
Yeah.
You've got A-frames with sandbags on them,
Mm-hmm.
so you get a more sturdier base, say with a quick lock, for instance. Different kind of signage takes up less footprint. It's all about footprint as well. Well, not all about it, but footprint is to be considered. To have solutions or equipment that you use that's got less of a footprint. One of that would, main area of that would be signage.
The list is endless. But yeah, we talked about learning difference, how you sign, height of signs. The rear of signs aren't allowed to be reflective. So at night time, you could be walking into that sign. There are also a lot of them metal. They fall on the floor, you've got the noise that upsets people. Traffic management companies, construction industry will be forcing pedestrians to go a particular route. And what's that surface like? We talked about gradients. If you've got a footway that's like that, if you ever watched a wheelchair, they tend to be nearer the building because that's where it's flatter. But if you force someone to an area that's like this, then they're going on one side. So then what do you need to add on for that? And then we've got that horrible term called money that gets involved, which causes disability. Because the fact that you didn't want to spend the extra to make it accessible, you're potentially getting people to stay at home or use another mode of transport.
How does that, as an industry, I guess, how does that not get overlooked in future then, or how do you raise awareness for people to account for that?
We've been giving training for God knows how many years now. So one of the things I've been doing is giving visual stuff for people to see, to watch members of the public struggle getting through sites. That led to getting more lived experience face to face. So we invite, like Chris has been out, probably about 3 or 4 from Chevron now, have been out with us, that have met members of the community. And when you walk with somebody, watch how they negotiate, and the empathy comes in. Looking at a picture, it's not as empathetic as it is when you actually meet those people. We've set up something called the 3-tier assessment, which Chris has mentioned earlier. And it's a simple way of, number one is, before you start works, know what your community is, or who's in that community that is more likely to be impacted by what you do. And ideally, you go for a walk or cycle, because we've got a lot of disabled cyclists that you need to consider. And there's a lot of people who feel vulnerable if you take something away. So it could be a parent and a child that cycle to school. There's a dedicated cycle route. Construction works might remove that. You expect them now to use the road and they don't want to cycle anymore. That is, you're disabling people by your approach on stuff. So tier 1 is to get to know that community. Tier 2 is when you're doing your design, you go, oh yeah, Doris gets impacted by this and Dave gets impacted by that. You add that flavour into your design. And then when you go and put it out, you get the same people to come and test it for you. And the more you do that, the more people get to start thinking about the people they might be impacting, instead of going, oh, this is the standard, stick the signs there and the ramp there. It's working, but slow.
And does London bring its own challenges in that regard if you're working with TfL, because it's not your...
Well, it's very busy and there's lots of things to consider. You've got bus stops, you've got parked cars, you've got lay-bys.
High traffic.
Multinational people who don't necessarily understand the laws of the road. If it's not obvious, they're struggling to sort of navigate their way past sites. You're limited on footpath space. The lane widths aren't very wide. There's lots of challenges that we need to consider. And a lot of the traffic management that you see out there is tied to framework contracts. It's tight on price. To consider heavier ramps or different items could potentially mean it being a 2-vehicle installation as opposed to 1, and all of a sudden the price is affected, or it needs to be covered. The cost needs to be covered by somebody. And what I've been trying to do is look at how we tick as many of these boxes as we can without actually lifting the price to the customer or reducing the impact as much as we possibly can.
And is that doable?
No, well, in some instances, yes. But then in some, no. But are the construction companies going to stand by what they say and be more inclusive and put some more effort into this, or not?
How is the only real answer legislation to make sure it's in from the start? Does it need something legislative on any construction or traffic management scheme to say you have had to account for X, Y, and Z? Or again, is that too difficult because of the scope and spectrum of individuals that you're trying to cater for?
There's legislation there already. It's called the Equality Act. It's called the Traffic Management Act, New Roads and Streetworks Act. It's there. It's how it's interpreted. But what Chris has mentioned, the money is a big factor. And under the Equality Act, it says, that sounds geeky now, but Section 20 of the Equality Act talks about you've got a duty not to cause substantial disadvantage to somebody disabled compared to somebody non-disabled. What's substantial disadvantage? And you have to make reasonable adjustments and what's reasonable. The interpretation of those words is quite, different people see it differently. I would say with the right energy, like say, let's use Chevron as an example, I will latch on to companies that have got energy. Because if companies treat it, I know we say tip box, if they treat it as a tip box, I don't feel it from that company. If they treat it like, actually, no, we need to change our culture. That's different wording now. I'll latch onto you and say, right, let's do some work together. And you talk about money, there's ways of being frugal with what you do. So less is more for a lot of people that's outside the construction industry realm. So you're saving money on signs. I know you will want to be charging for the more signs you put on, more traffic management. But if you do an approach that actually reduces the cost, you want it to get more work, you're then setting up a layout that reduces the impacts on those communities that you hurt the most. There's the other ways of being frugal. There's a lot of people wanting to trial stuff out there. And as cheeky as I am, I will normally say, would you like to try your product for free here for a while? And we're doing it all. And then people get to know you for somebody who wants to trial products. You'll get flooded with stuff. And if you work it nicely, over the year you can be spreading out these trials and then meeting that demand at the same time. Being cheeky, but...
Is there anything that can be done? You mentioned like get to know your community earlier. Is there anything that, let's say, contractors can do that might not seem so obvious to get to know that community? Is it a case of just spending time there and speaking to people? Is it a case of surveys or a different kind of research? Like, how would a company go about getting to know that community? 3-tier
assessment. That's what I did it for. Because that number one sets you off. Go and look at who's living there, who's moving around, who do you need to consider. It's an easy thing. It's under considered construction scene best practice hub. So it's deemed as best practice nationally. It's just that people don't like, oh, it's change. Why use it if it's not broken? But it is broken. So it is there. It's just knocking it into people.
I mean, there's a cost attached to going to a site to have a look, isn't there? Well, if we have a traffic management scheme, for the most part, most traffic management companies, I'll have a look on Google Earth. Yeah, that's what it looks like. Let's make sure that image is up to date, which you can check online. And there might be the odd occasion where it's not quite right, but actually, if you take a step back and have a look at what's in the area, you can see the schools, you can see there's a hospital, you can see that there's different buildings that would attract or detract from different people. You can see that there's a park. You know, you might just, from a bird's eye image, you might see a path through a park and think, well, that would be a suitable pedestrian diversion. But there's the information online to let you know what types of crime happen. Are you going to divert vulnerable people through a park where there's a lot of criminal activity in the evenings? That's not being considered right now. So what we need to do is educate our designers. We need to make sure that they understand the challenges of different people that are likely to pass through the site.
And can you, or have you ever designed a scheme, implemented a scheme, it gets to work, and then you think, that got just overlooked or not seen, or it couldn't have been accounted for? Can you change on the fly?
Yeah, and if you go back to Michael's 3-tier assessment, you know, tier 1 is go and have a look and design, install it, and then go back afterwards and look at the impact that it's having. You'd be amazed. We've looked at our sites together and seen the impact that it's had on people. There was a site we were diverting pedestrians through what could only be described as a lake. It was a puddle, wasn't it, in the footpath. But you know, people were having to walk through 6 inches of water to get past the site.
Then us two cleaned it. We got the guys out and we get involved and brush the water out as well. So it's challenging. I think any city's challenging because nothing's going to be perfect for you to play with space.
Does it bring more challenges that often there are multiple companies involved on the scheme? So you could value inclusive design 10 out of 10. If you're closing a highway and there are other people operating on it that don't care as much, does that make your job more difficult, and how do you go about working with those people to kind of bring them up to speed?
So, you know, we can install, and this same site is a good example, we'll often be asked to install a traffic management scheme, and on day 1, it's pristine. By day 5, it's not quite so. Now, they're not paying us to go and and maintain it and look after it on a daily basis. Well, we'll look after that ourselves. So then you're relying on the workers on site to do that. Now, the classic example was that footway. People were being diverted through a small pond, and we had to ask them for a sweeping brush and clear the water away so that it was actually usable. And eventually they took the brush and the shovel off us and helped out, but it kind of had to be pointed out to them, and they probably wouldn't have done it if they had not realised that Michael was with TfL.
So how do you encourage more companies to collaborate in that way, to notice that themselves, not need a visit when you just happen to be on site?
Well, we do get asked a lot to go out, and so what's nice for me to hear is somebody rings up or emails saying, "Oh, Michael, can you come and check our site, please?" That is the ideal scenario. What we've been doing is we're going to come around your site and score it, and because it's a public highway, we're not coming into your site, we're coming to assess how you're impacting everybody else. And it kind of gets people's backs up in a way, let's say, but they can't do anything about it. And then they start getting nervous. So when we do group walks around multiple sites, people go, "Oh no, our site's next. What's it going to point out here? What's the problems we're going to get?" And then what that leads to is, "Michael, could you have a look at these sites we're potentially going to start on to make sure we don't do anything wrong?"
Also, it does have a long-term impact.
Oh yeah,
rather than a reactive.
we don't name and shame. I don't believe in that. I don't think that works. I think it's building partnership. I mentioned that before, we'll latch on to that partnership. What we've had to do is look at how we can share that information across the board. So yes, my role's TfL, technically within the M25, but I've been going out all over the place. The Icelandic Coastal Administration a couple of months ago to talk about the same kind of thing. Done some stuff in Seattle, in Tehran, conversations in Australia. The word disability and inclusion isn't just for London, is it? It's for everywhere.
So when you go to all of these different places, is there anyone or anywhere that you would say have got it nailed?
No.
There's a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. I think you get individual sites you can do good stuff. We've got examples of this is what good looks like, but it doesn't look good enough across the board. And people see it as you're going above and beyond when you're doing this. And the idea is if we go above and beyond all the time, that becomes business as usual, which means you're not going above and beyond anymore. You're doing what you should be doing. That's the way it should be. There's permit systems out there. You have to send in your traffic management to a council, they assess it, sign it off and give you a permit with expectations you're going to meet these needs. And Chris is right, it might be good day one, day two, and it's not always the site's fault, but technically you're still supposed to be checking it 3 times a day. Community will move your stuff around because they feel they can, and sometimes it's antisocial behaviour that causes that. But again, it needs the councils and the constructors to work closer together, I think sometimes there's a little bit of a divide. So a council would tend to be more office space, wouldn't go out and see as much what's happening, and we can't go out and look at 50,000-60,000 sets of works in a year with the amount of staff you have. So it's reliant on this is your responsibility to take care of it. But CCTV is a good thing. The school will say, well, how often are you changing that routine? If it's just the once, they can embed it in the kids to be aware of that, so you don't have so much issues. Colours is another thing. So you've got high energy colours, you've got complex patterns. The wording can be overloading on some people. So we, not so much with traffic management, but if you're a developer's putting a hoarding up that's black, we say we don't like black. We want soft pastel colours, because black can impact some people with dementia, can impact some people that are visually impaired. See it as a whole, don't want to go near it. Black also darkens areas, potential for opportunity crime, and if there's opportunity crime or you design in what's called anonymity for that potential offender, you get fear of crime. Fear of crime disables people from doing stuff. It's that word disabled. People think disabled is oh, you must be using a wheelchair, you must be having a long cane or a guide dog. I get disabled. I've been disabled through how I've had a menu. Can't read the thing because you've written it in such a way. I'm like, sorry, what's this? And you've got it here. Your toilet. Where's the handle? Where is the toilet? You know, it's, you've got a...
Don't bring out pushing, that's not on there. It just makes me a nice chat.
Yeah, but it just shows you, but we do things that we don't realise.
Every day as well.
So a simple bit of mitigation to make your toilet accessible, you put a sign up saying toilet. And then a handle. Because imagine, so if I brought one of my team, Winnie, who's visually impaired, she'd be feeling her, it'll just be black for her because it is black, the material. She'll be going, there's nothing contrasting to go to. And that's how you disable people from doing things. The word disability is a horrible word, and this is something I promote. I've got loads of mentors at TfL and external to this. You've got a medical and social model disability. I don't know if you've heard of that. You will have, because I preach it enough. The medical model is you're disabled by your impairment. So you can't do something because you've got one leg, or you can't see, or you can't hear. The social model is you're disabled by the environment and attitudes that society brings, like what we just said here. Or it could be my language or how I've written you something that disables you from doing something. So construction disables people. And how do you remove that disability? And this is what we're about now, isn't it? It's getting the industry to go, all right, I get the social model, let's focus on that, because you're not focusing on an individual then, are you? And most people will go to wheelchair or blind or partially sighted. They seem to get home in on that, and they forget that there's a massive spectrum of people to consider.
And do you need like data sets to consider people like that, or?
Well, it's there. I've mentioned there's 20% of the community are disabled or long-term illness. That's all you need to know. You don't need to go into the minutiae, which is a big posh word for me, but you just need to know, yes, there are people out there that you need to consider. 80% of that 20-odd% of the community is an invisible disability. So you will be looking around and wouldn't have a clue where they might struggle with stuff.
But even on a design, if we have the mindset that 20% of the population, so in all instances, 20% of the people need to be considered in a more inclusive way, you've already made a start on the journey, haven't you?
Yeah.
So the educational piece with the designers, with the CAD drawers, for me is kind of the starting point.
What are some of the big shifts that you've made so far then when it comes to planning a scheme? Are there one, two, or a handful of things that now always get factored in that maybe 10 years ago just simply wouldn't have?
So we've made a point of giving our designers, CAD operators, a lot more training just over the past sort of 12 months. And what we've also been doing is discussing different designs and the effects. And we need to carry on with that journey and just get the people to understand that, you know, while they're looking at the immediate area of the traffic management, they need to zoom out, check out what churches, schools, hospitals, different buildings. There's information there that's readily available that doesn't cost anything to be able to consider these things. And then the other thing that we need to do is make sure that the people that are designing the schemes actually do understand what products are available to do the right job. And as Chevron, what we're looking to do is identify products that either aren't there and put some effort into coming up with something that would suit a scenario, or work with suppliers and manufacturers to come up with products that will tick that box.
And are there any examples of those that you've already could say, for example, we did this here and that made a big difference to that community?
It's a journey that we're on, and it's an ongoing assessment. So we're looking at various digital products. We're working with various manufacturers and distributors, doing a lot of work with Michael. We've come up with a number of products that we think that's a great idea, and then when we put it on the ground, we start to realise that we're creating other issues. So it's just an ongoing piece of work. I wouldn't say the ramp that has been worked on. There's several manufacturers producing different ramps in different ways, and they tick some of the boxes, but not all. And what we've also got to remember is, in an urban environment, there's not two jobs that are the same, really, because there's so many different moving parts on a site. You couldn't just go, oh, I want two-way traffic lights installed in on Regent Street, and that same set of two-way lights will work around the corner on Oxford. And there are no pedestrians. You don't get a bus stop on the M25, do you? You don't. You know, you might have a lay-by. There's just a lot more to consider.
Can tech play a big part?
A little. Not if we can get access to tech. I would not rely on it, is a good word, but utilise it where it can help.
It can play a part, can't it?
It can play a part. We did, yeah.
We've seen products, and it's also how do you raise awareness of what tech or what apps you need on your phone. And you know, I've come to Michael with a couple of ideas. I'm like, oh yeah, I've got this beacon. It you know, it can let people know if they've got the app, but you need to. So I'm like, let's put the barcode on the sign. You know, download this app.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is you're getting vulnerable people to get the phone out in a city urban environment, which
Yeah,
stand a stronger chance of getting the phone taken off them, don't they? You know.
Yeah, okay.
I do upset people when I give them an answer.
So you can think you're on a good idea, but it ends up being a bore.
Like London's pretty renowned for the scooter thieves, isn't it?
Well, it's on illegal e-bikes, the speed they can go, and they can be on the footway and you won't hear them. And then your phone's gone. But yeah, if you've got a lot of constructors put barcodes on to get access to something that site's promoting, and you're doing that, and your phone's in the air now, isn't it? So but there's pros and cons. Yeah, a lot of people use applications from phones and stuff. It's how it's done, I think, but understanding also that a lot of people don't use them and don't like to get them out, and people don't like to get the phones out now because of fear of crime. They're kind of looking around, get my phone. Oh, I'm gonna admit they'll come really. I won't bother. So then, what you've tried isn't going to work. But use of phone through Bluetooth. There was a gentleman. So we as in TFO, we're working on a scheme where we were taking out all the zebra crossings, putting in formal push buttons. Disabled this gentleman who lived there because he can't lift his arm off his wheelchair rest. So we missed that, and TFL promotes Every Journey Matters. So during the temporary, we met him, talked about what he experienced. He then mentioned there's two other people who have a similar condition to him in that area, so we got to be aware of the people we need to think about. So we discussed different types of stuff. We came up with this one, I won't mention the name of the company because I can't remember anyway, where he can access it, press a fob and it switches on the call for the lights. So he now can cross the road, but before he wouldn't be able to do it unless he's got a PA, a personal assistant with him. Because we try not to use the word care anymore now. Language is another challenge. Yeah, in that sense it's good. Sightline's another one, I'll mention the name, which is audible for somebody visually impaired to talk them. You're approaching some works, it does this, you follow through. You've now gone through it and let them know there's stuff like that's nice. But again, some people don't want to hear stuff in their ear because it takes away the environment as well.
If you land on a winner, let's just say a product that can solve a particular issue, is there a challenge to rolling it out? Because as you've just said, that urban environment's so different every time. Is it a case of...
Well, it is, because you might come across a winning product that you think ticks a box, but it's not approved for use on the highway. So you talk about the pedestrian crossing and somebody having a push button and it being Bluetooth controlled. I'm not aware that there's a Topaz approved product on the market. Now, some local authorities would quite happily go look at it and go, yeah, that would be okay to use, but not all local authorities would go against what is actually approved to actually be used.
Trialing's, you have to trial stuff to find out.
was going to say, can you get around that? Because the compliance is the barrier, but can we get around that by trialing certain things? Then you've got the data, and then you can implement it and it becomes standard. It's quite a long process, isn't it? But that's what we should be working towards.
Yeah, it can be years processing doing all this stuff.
I can just see a potential frustration of you do something for years, then it works there,
Now it's out of
and
date.
then you almost can't scale it because it doesn't work for anywhere
It's
else or
also
most
costs.
other places. That must be a big frustration.
It's costs. I think, again, to make something costs money. To do moulds for new types of traffic management costs thousands. And I always say, I'm kind of old schoolish in that approach, but you stick to the basics. If you get the basics right, then you can build on other stuff. But a lot of companies aren't getting the basics right, and they want to do all this tech and stuff to get themselves in the media. Get your basics right. That would then set a good standard off.
And what are those basics for you?
Again, your layout, your considerate layout. Just put a considerate layout out. That's your basics to help people maneuver through what you're doing. And then where you recognise people in those particular areas need more help, more assistance, what extra can you help them get that? And that's where the tech could come in then.
What do you think is the biggest barrier? Is it cost? Is it ignorance? Is it lack of care? What do you think is the biggest?
Right, as humans, I'd say companies are cold. It's just a name, the company. The people who work in the company we are warm beings, we've got warm blood. It's the pressures that get put on you that make you react in certain ways, and it comes down to money. So you might have somebody who's still very empathetic and caring, but I can't do that because the company's constraining me not to do that, or the contract's constraining me not to do that.
And how do you challenge that?
You've got to have energy. You've got to have energy to look at, to be inclusive and sustain. The big word is sustainable now, is how can I do this that meets that budget, that meets that, you've got all these different things of demands in one package. And if you can find that balance for all that, then you've met what you want. But you've got to be energetic to be willing to look for all that. And if you're doing, for designers of getting how many, because I'm sure you're going, where's my drawings? You've got to hurry up and get, all right, here's my drawing.
That was a good impression.
I was going to say, I sort of looked that way then. I thought he
I thought
opened
it
his
was-
mouth.
That was
He
a
looked at
really.
me like he thought he'd spoken.
It wasn't reality. There would have been a lot of swearing in that.
Well, we did say there's no swearing on this
Yeah.
show. No, I hear, no, because I meet designers and they tell me they're under a lot of pressure. Imagine you're stuck behind a screen and you've got to do all this stuff and out. Then yeah, it's about valuing them for their role, because we don't do that. I think we're all part of a flow chart, aren't we? You got to do that. I want my money, right, next job. Beating that is going to be hard work. And I think this is where the councils come into play, and people like TfL, where we have this set procedures. Sorry, mate, we can't sign that off until you've done that. And I've got a really good example with a demolition contractor. We partnered with the council, which was at the time, this is Southwark Council, for their licensing, not to sign the license with this demolition contractor. We were a little bit annoyed, but basically they wanted to shut a footway, or 4 footways, and they were under pressure by the client because it was cost. We're under pressure, we need to get this done, we want it signed off, and they were putting pressure on the person ready to sign the permit. And I said, no, don't, let them talk to me. So they were coming to me, why are you holding it back? I said, well, you shut the footway, here, here, and here. When you go on that other footway, it's got no drop curbs. And the whip's a bit tight. And you've got this little hospital called Guy's Hospital right next to it. And, well, who tends to be walking around here? Patients. Some are using wheelchairs, some are on crutches. I said, we would like, I didn't say we want, I said we would like those to be all made flush, remove that. We actually got them to rip out all the footway, which was kind of a horrible. You had enough room for I don't like to use the word standard wheelchair, but there was a wheelchair user came out to test it for me. He fitted on it just enough on the flat bit, and then it banked off like that. Now you could get somebody walking the opposite way, that they could be falling over in the road. So right, we would like that done. So they paid the Suffolk contractor to rip it all out, lay it flush, put all these nice drop curbs in. We then said, we don't want you to use black hoardings, because they were signing off the licenses. Well, what do you want? I said, well, here's a soft pastel palette. Have a choose of those and do any of them. They did that. They went, all right, we'll do this colour. And they went, she signed it off. Happy days. That's the nice way to do things. But it's using our processes and stuff. And as partnerships, because that particular person that wasn't fully aware of some of the stuff we were promoting, but then got to know about it, and that gives her support, knowing this is the educational side that's important. Well, actually, we need this doing and that doing before I'll sign anything off. And when you're looking at handover charges, do you ever get involved in handover charges? So with the developer, we'll put a contract out for the works, you'll have a principal contractor, they've agreed this to finish their product by, this is when I give you your building back to get your clients in, etc. That date, every week after that, they've got a handover charge. So if you're 2 weeks delay at 100 grand a week, handover charge, 200 grand. I've met some contractors that are 3 months behind. You don't need to do the maths there, do you?
No.
So it's important they have everything signed off in time. So they will be proactive and say, Michael, what do we think we need for this to make sure we don't get late? I says, well, this is the processes. You need to know the processes. And that's your game changer, if you've got the right sense.
Is there anything in the procurement process to kind of stipulate what should be in place as far as being inclusive on sites? If we're going there, if you're going there afterwards to assess or sign off or anything like that, is there anything that could be put into it beforehand so that the contractor that wins the work, for instance, must be able to cater the right word, but be on top of that?
But procurement for who though? So say for example, Chevron go for a contract with a well-known highway contractor.
Mm-hmm.
The procurement between those two, you mean, on that contract side?
I would say yes, and for the tier one contractor. So, you know, if you're managing your supply chain and you have to deliver a project or a site, so for instance, a few years ago, there would be a small section in a quality submission based around social value, carbon reduction. Now, it's very much, not standard, but it's very much emphasised, isn't it, what we do in highways in particular. So I'm wondering if there's something that is already, or could be in the procurement process that kind of drives that forward. That's part of the process right from the beginning. Would that be a step change towards what
it would be, because I don't really get involved in procurement so much. I know we've had conversations with teams on we should be getting stuff in our processes. But something I can go back and...
So it would be part of, say, social value or communities.
Which is your tick box.
Yeah, but if it's agreed or part of that process, then when it comes to delivering the work, maybe then that tier one will then, if they're using a traffic management company, say you have to consider
do such
this
and
in your
such a
design
way,
process, and it becomes more the norm that it's in the process rather than relying on companies such as ourselves or similar to ourselves, where we're trying to educate our own designers, if you like. If it's part of the contract and it's part of that, like similar to in the past, where you know we've looked at communities, social value, what we're doing to support local schools, that kind of thing. That if that was part of it, it would become more of the norm going forward.
I think what we've got on the social value front is everybody's looking at, as part of these submissions, they're looking at what they have to do, and quite often we look at what's the minimum we have to do to tick the box, and then the people that are actually assessing and scoring the social value submission, do they actually understand the value? You know, is that just ticking the? But is that just catering for the bare minimum? Or is that, you know, above and beyond?
Well, you go above and beyond when you want your awards, isn't it?
That's right.
To be blunt,
Yeah.
because everyone likes an award. Look at us, we've won this award. Because it goes out there, doesn't it? I see it all the time. I do get frustrated with some contractors where the social value element's very clear on LinkedIn. We're doing all this and that and the other. But what about your basics? What about, I've been to some of your sites and you're promoting that this is your ethos and image, but you're not doing it here and there and everywhere else. But I'm not the one I won't be going putting all that on public media to show where you're not. But it's, yeah, procurement's a tough one, but I think with Chevron, we've got a TfL scheme that Chevron are working with our contractor. I'd have to have a look. I get the feeling because we did the tier 1 part of the assessment. So I went out with the contractor to have a walk around to highlight stuff that they need to be considering. And then it went very quiet. And then we've been out twice, in fact 3 times, it'll be 3 times coming up now since, where I've met Chevron, we've done walks, we've made good changes that were identified to make it more accessible and safe for the local community. I would need to look at what they've done as part of that whole contract for the contractor, what they've signed up for with TfL. See, was the 3-tier assessment embedded in that contract from the beginning, or was that just a good to have thing? I don't know. This is something we definitely have to look at. But yeah, I think has everybody heard of an equality impact assessment? Heard of one, but don't know what it is. Right. So you as a business should be aware of. So equality impact assessment helps you with your duties under the Equality Act to consider protected characteristics, which there are 9, and I always forget all 9, so I'm not going to for this thing because people just can't remember it. But having that embedded in a scheme design. So if you were going to do a product, or you were going to look at how you run as a business, you do an EQIA to make sure you're not discriminate against any members of your teams or members of the public with what you do under the Act, because that is breaching law. You're not supposed to do that, and that could come down on you quite hard. You can do that then as an expectation of, right, so I've got this, the EQIA is, we then have to consider that in our approach of what we do, which is 3-tier assessment's an easy one to say, or there could be other methods of doing that meets that need under the Equality Act. Now, if you're doing on a procurement, the Equality Act's law anyway, so you should be following that stuff. Social value is you're doing little bits for that community as part of that tick box. But how you impact on people is, are you substantially impacting on a member of the community? You shouldn't be doing that under law. So that's but people are still quoting, they say DDA this, DDA, have you heard of DDA? Disability Discrimination Act, 95 that was. When did the Equality Act come into play? You guys should know this. 2010. So,
Got that.
right?
Just say 2010 again.
So,
Yeah, go
Just
that.
right. So, 2010, correct, yes. 2010 is how many years ago?
Oh, a long time.
50.
So you kind of think that the Equality Act's an embedded bit of law. 15 years, and people are still quoting DDA. I went to a brand new development, and I do a lot of work. It's called Stepped Into Work. So I have a young person that's neurodivergent or has a learning difference with me for 3 months. I only have 2 or 3 placements a year. So I've ended up meeting up with other groups like Blind in Business. And I had 2 young women, they were both 15, 16, doing work experience with me. And I was showing around a site, we were talking about access and safety, etc. And one of the young women wanted to use the toilet. So I've gone to reception, said, we've got an accessible toilet, please. He went, oh, it's down the corridor on the left. So I've looked down, I've gone, okay. Black door, black door, black door. And I thought, crikey, where's the toilet? So I'm leading her now, she's holding onto my elbow, I'm taking her down. And I couldn't say anything to say accessible toilet, because we don't use the word disabled toilet anymore. And then I've looked closely at one, and with my eyesight, it's not great. It's got this dark green writing on a black door. So that is immediately no, where's the contrast? DDAWC. What does that mean? What does WC mean? Water closet. What does DDA mean? Which you now know.
That's the act.
Disability
Yeah, that's the
discrimination.
act.
Right, hang on. This is 2 years ago. How long's the Equality Act been in place?
2010, I think.
How long's the
Yes,
door?
well done. So it's a proper educational session. But-
Listen.
Right, so I've not been ignorant. I've said, this is the toilet. So I went in and checked for her. She went in, went to the toilet, come back. I've approached the desk. I said, you know, do you realise you've got DDAWC on the door? And this person went, oh, don't you know that's the Disability Discrimination Act? I was like, okay. I said, you do realise that's been out of date since 2010? Or you're going to have to speak to the manager. Anyway, I said to her, I explained to her, they did make a change to it, I'll give them the dues, but it's just lack of education. You know, and the fact is, I can't see the thing. Sorry, I nearly swore then, but I can't see it because you put it on dark grid. Now, for somebody who relies on contrast, they ain't going to see that neither. So you disable them from seeing it. So again, it's cultures and embedded. Yeah, and that's now costing money to fix it.
How much emphasis should be on like leadership then in our sector to make that sort of embedded in a business, and then it's a top-down line of thinking that makes everybody aware?
Right, I would flick it. I think, yes, you need good leadership, but you also need, do I need to stop something? Sorry, I've just seen that.
You got 2 minutes.
Right, okay. So you need good leadership, but you also need bottom up, because it's the bottom up that get to see what's going on. The top down don't get to see it. Chris wouldn't normally have seen a lot of stuff until I took him out, and he's gone, oh my gosh. And same with one of his colleagues, Keith, who's been out with me, who said exactly the same thing. It changed him as a person, that's why we're sitting here together today. It's built that relationship. So you need that to accept, you don't know everything, but yes, you've got this massive role, but you need to respect your staff. And I think it's Korea to do the reverse pyramid, where the C-suite, it's a new term I've been learning now, the top people in the company are at the bottom, supporting the ones underneath. And the ones that are the most important are probably on that top layer, that get everything done. And that to me seems a nice way. Did that answer the question? I've forgotten.
Good place to break because you stopped
Yeah.
before you said something else. So
Sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
No, you're
Probably toilet time.
You're flying.
Yeah, we'll crack on. We'll
But
crack on straight
you can-
after
you
this
can-
because we kind of had in mind there's
This is the safety week, isn't it? So it needs to be out by that day. I'm just trying to think. So the director I've got a nice relationship with, so I could always give you his name as well. And he'll go, right, let's have a look at this, guys. Hopefully, say that.
Give it to us all and we'll just pepper him with emails until he...
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
GDPR. get me in trouble then. Right, okay then. So,
Looking forward then, what would success in this field look like in 5 years' time? Should every site possess certain things or have certain traits, if that's the best way to put it? What does success look like, I guess, for you folks at Chevron and for you folks at TfL?
Well, success for us would be that there's more consideration on sites. I'd like to think that we'll develop a range of products that will cater for that and set us apart from the rest of the crowd.
Just talking about it today, I'm already thinking, I can't wait to walk through a city centre, look at sites, and I'll look at them in a different way. And that's just from having this conversation. So whether I work in construction or for a construction company or not is irrelevant. As a person, I'm going to look at it now because we've had these conversations and see how things could be done differently. So if we can just talk about it more, consider it more, and then that then leads through to our designers, our exec, our workforce, and then everybody starts considering what it's like or what can be done better, then surely that's a good thing.
Because I mean, you know, from what Michael was saying, just getting the basics right. If we just get the basics right and we make people more aware and we are more considerate, we're not really adding cost on. You know, going that extra mile and pushing it to the next level would maybe consider, or it may incur additional costs. But to just get the basics right would be we'd be halfway there.
And from a TfL point of view, in 5 years' time, I would like to see, how would you finish your sentence?
I wouldn't say 5 years. I would say, what day is it?
By Friday.
By tomorrow. No, I would say within a year, really, because it's very possible. Chevron have to focus on Chevron. TfL consider the whole network is everyone's on the same page. That was what I would like to see. So yes, it'd be great for Chevron to be the exemplar and lead, but then everybody's go, right, we need to be there and be there with them within that year, let's say. That would be the perfect scenario. The problem we have is that competitiveness and the money, and how do we break down that? And I think bigger frameworks could answer that question. You might disagree with me on here. It's taken a while to answer that one.
No, I think there needs to be consideration by the utility companies and by the tier ones, where they're asking us to price and we're actually considering the design, or we're putting consideration into the design to eliminate a lot of these issues, as opposed to doing the bare minimum and ticking a box.
I think that was that EQIA I talked about. If you all do an EQIA on what you do, being inclusive is considering not just disabled people, women, people who are pregnant, older people, different religions, different cultures in one package. But you've got to look at what you do, and you're right about you have to start at home. Home for you guys is Chevron. TfL does this a lot. We talk within different teams, we understand from different areas, because we've got nearly 30,000 staff, which is a bit of a beast of a company, and you can't all be knowing what everybody else is doing. But you guys can learn from, you only need to start with, we've got 3 in this room now that can explode into, and 40 people are aware, and then more, and then embrace that culture change. And then you lead the way on it, and then let the others come up. But you need to get the recognition for it. And it's no good you doing all this good work and then they don't want you to do the work because you're more expensive than this one. I want to know that you're not impacting on communities by what you do, and I support that as a business. For those other businesses to realise, yes, and your clients to realise, yeah, we need to step up with what we do. But there's ways of doing it more frugally, and if you can bring that two together, you should be on a winner. Should be on the winner. It's a challenge.
What sort of advice or messages would you give to companies that have maybe got inclusivity on their radar but don't really know what to do beyond the norm, or even to companies that maybe just don't even factor this sort of stuff in? What would be your underlying message to those companies as to why this is so important?
Yeah. Well, we'll partner with you and help you on the journey. I think if you've got somebody with you to help you, and TfL is quite, I don't like to use the word brand, but we've got a good name for stuff. I think London's show is a world-renowned city for doing stuff of good value, and TfL's got that name to go with it. We've got probably one of the best transport systems in the world and how we do stuff. We will work with you on that journey, and I don't think we're really charged either for it. Don't quote that one when it goes out, but he knows. We are
Thank you, charges.
But what I'm saying is, no, we're there. We represent the community, don't we? So we will work with you to help the community. That's what I get paid to ensure the safety and well-being of the community is always incorporated into what people do. So that's my job. I get paid to do that. If I'm doing that, helping you get to that point, I'm doing my job at the same time. And then you're learning from that, and then you can embed that in your systems. And Chris knows, because they do it all the time. Oh, Michael, we're doing this other scheme. Can you have a look at it? Yeah, of course I can, because we know what we're on about. That, yes, this is why it's so important to form partnerships. And at some point, it'll be business as usual. I think that's what you're aiming at, isn't it? Does that answer that question?
Yeah. Last thing, actually, we ask everyone, because the podcast called The Extra Mile, we just ask everybody what the extra mile or going the extra mile means to them. So, question to both, well, everyone, what does going the extra mile mean to you?
Chris, you start first.
For
and I'll
me,
feed off what
going
you
the
say.
extra mile is adding value to a job in some way. That doesn't always mean that you've got a higher bill, but you're offering a service that makes the customer want to come back. So for me, going the extra mile would be just adding something additional to what we do. We're not just supplying traffic management.
Oh, crikey, it's a tough one. It could go off on so many different angles. So extra mile, yes, being more considerate, valuing what you do, enjoying what you do, because a lot of people do it for the sake of it, or if you're in a job you don't enjoy, you shouldn't be in that job. So it's bringing enjoyment to that job to make you give 100% of everything you're doing, and it's not a chore doing it. So I wouldn't say going the extra mile is necessary. I know this is what it's about today, but to reach extra mile is going above and beyond becoming business as usual. That probably doesn't mean anything for that, but does that help?
You're all
It's
good.
a tough
Honestly,
one. No, it's a
you're
tough
all
one.
good.
It's a tough one.
You're all good.
120 mile an hour in a 120 mile an hour zone, just to be legal.
Sound? Happy? Yeah, appreciate you.